The morning Earth said goodbye to its children was gray and cold. Thick clouds covered the launch facility, and rain tapped against the windows of the observation deck, where families gathered to watch their loved ones leave forever. Maybe forever. Anyway, nobody really knew. Rivers pressed her palm against the cool metal of the airlock door and took a deep breath. Behind her, 49 other humans waited in silence. Some checked their equipment for the 100th time. Others stared at photos of people they might never see again. A few prayed quietly. "Time to go," she said, and her voice carried no doubt even though her heart hammered against her ribs. The defiant dawn waited for them beyond the airlock. It looked small and fragile compared to the massive coalition ships that floated nearby, like silver whales. Those ships belonged to the aliens who had given humanity this impossible choice. "Prove you deserve to join the galaxy," they said, "or stay trapped in your own solar system forever." Rivers had read the files 1,000 times. The Centauri Republic with their blue skin and cold eyes. The Zephyrians who looked like walking trees and spoke in musical tones that somehow always sounded angry. The mechanical beings called the Construct Collective who treated biological life like interesting but ultimately flawed experiments. They all agreed on one thing. Humans were too dangerous, too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted among civilized species. The crew moved through the ship like they had practiced for months because they had every system check, every safety protocol, every emergency procedure had been drilled until they could do it in their sleep. The ship hummed around them as the fusion reactor came online, and the primitive shields flickered to life. All stations. "Report ready," called out Torres from the engineering section. His accent still carried traces of his childhood in Mexico City, back when Earth felt infinite instead of like a prison. "Navigation systems online," added Wang from her position at the helm. She had been the youngest person ever accepted into the deep space program, and now she was piloting humanity's last chance into the unknown. Rivers settled into the command chair and looked at the main screen. Earth filled the view, blue and white and beautiful. Somewhere down there, 8 billion people waited to hear if their species would join the galactic community or remain forever alone. The coalition had been very clear about the rules. One ship, one crew, 10 years to explore the outer rim and make contact with unknown species. If the humans could prove they were capable of diplomacy, trade, and peaceful cooperation, the quarantine would end. If they failed, or if they never returned, Earth would remain cut off from the galaxy until the end of time. Most of the coalition representatives had made it clear they expected failure. Ambassador Thane of the Centauri Republic had even started a betting pool among the diplomatic corps. The odds were heavily against human survival past the first year. "Launch control is giving us clearance," Wang announced. Rivers nodded. "Take us out." The defiant dawn lifted away from Earth's surface with a gentle push that pressed everyone back into their seats. Through the viewports, the blue sky faded to black and stars appeared like tiny diamonds scattered across velvet. Behind them, Earth grew smaller until it looked like just another point of light. The coalition escort ships fell into formation around them. 3 sleek destroyers that could have turned the defiant dawn into scrap metal in seconds if the humans tried anything stupid. Their message was clear: "We're watching you. Don't make us regret this." As they passed the outer marker that defined the edge of coalition space, the escort ships peeled away and headed home. The defiant dawn was alone now, just 50 humans in a metal shell racing toward the unknown at a significant fraction of light speed. Rivers walked through the ship during their first night in deep space. The crew had settled into their routines quickly, but she could see the tension in their faces. They all knew the odds. Coalition records showed that 60% of ships venturing into the outer rim never returned. Pirates, hostile aliens, mechanical failures, navigation errors, or simple bad luck claimed them all. But humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped them out completely. They had crawled out of caves and built cities and reached for the stars despite every obstacle the universe threw at them. Maybe that stubborn refusal to give up would be enough. The ship's computer chimed softly as they crossed another milestone. 1 light year from Earth, then 2, then 5. The blue marble that had been humanity's entire world was now invisible among millions of other stars, and still they flew deeper into the darkness. Dr. Martinez found her in the observation lounge, 3 weeks into the journey. The xenobiologist had volunteered for the mission knowing she would probably never return to her research lab on Luna. Like all of them, she had given up everything for a chance to save her species. "Any regrets?" Martinez asked as they watched stars drift past the viewport. Rivers considered the question. She thought about her apartment in Geneva, her books, her garden where she grew tomatoes and peppers and herbs that reminded her of childhood, summers. She thought about friends who had begged her not to go and family who had cried when she said goodbye. "Ask me in 10 years, she said finally. Martinez smiled. "Fair enough. Though I have a feeling we're going to see things out there that will change us in ways we can't imagine." She was more right than either of them knew. The outer rim held wonders and terrors beyond human comprehension. Ancient civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun was born. Technologies that made coalition science look like stone tools. And somewhere in that vast wilderness of space and time, an encounter that would transform not just the 50 humans aboard the Defiant Dawn, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. But that was still years in the future. For now, they flew through the night between stars, carrying Earth's hopes and dreams toward whatever destiny waited for them in the unknown. 3 years after the human ship vanished into the outer rim, Ambassador Thane collected his winnings from the betting pool. Most of the Coalition Diplomatic Corps had wagered the humans would last 2 years at best. A few optimists had given them 3. Only one delegate from the remote Kalari system had bet they might survive 5 years, and even she admitted it was more hope than logic. The coalition moved forward as if humanity had never existed. Trade routes expanded, new colonies were established, and the great wheel of galactic civilization continued to turn. The quarantine around Earth remained in effect, enforced by automated sentinel stations that had standing orders to disable any human vessel that tried to leave the solar system. On the Zephyrian homeworld of Verdania, the Council of Roots discussed expansion into the Outer Rim territories. Their scout ships had reported rich mineral deposits on dozens of worlds that the humans were supposed to explore. With the primitive explorers presumably dead, those resources were available for claiming. "The humans served one useful purpose," announced Elder Branch, his bark-like skin creaking as he gestured toward a holographic star map. "Their failure proves that biological species cannot survive in the lawless regions beyond civilized space. We shall send automated mining platforms instead." The Centauri Republic had similar plans. Their military leaders viewed the Outer Rim as a buffer zone that could be slowly absorbed into their territory. Without human interference, they could establish forward bases and begin the long process of claiming entire star systems for the Republic. Even the Construct Collective, normally indifferent to territorial expansion, saw opportunity in the empty space beyond coalition borders. Their digital consciousness required ever more processing power, and uninhabited worlds could be converted into massive server farms without the complications of biological life. But while the major powers made their plans, strange reports filtered back from the frontier. Trading vessels spoke of ghost signals on abandoned communication networks. Scout patrols reported debris fields that seemed to be arranged in deliberate patterns. Most disturbing of all, several coalition ships had simply vanished while investigating the Outer Rim, with no distress signals and no trace of wreckage. On Earth, humanity struggled with isolation and uncertainty. The United Earth government maintained regular communication schedules with the Defiant Dawn, but the signals took longer and longer to reach their destination as the ship traveled deeper into unknown space. After 18 months, the last message had arrived garbled and incomplete. After 2 years, silence. Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the Deep Space Communication Project, spent her days listening to static from empty space. Her arrays of radio telescopes pointed toward the last known position of the Defiant Dawn, hoping for any sign that 50 humans still lived somewhere among the stars. "Maybe no news is good news," her assistant suggested during one of their endless monitoring sessions. Chen shook her head. "Or maybe they're all dead and we just haven't accepted it yet." The hardest part was not knowing. If the ship had been destroyed, they would have detected the energy signature of a fusion reactor explosion. If it had been captured, surely the Coalition would have received some kind of ransom demand or threat. The complete absence of information suggested something worse than death. It suggested that the Defiant Dawn had simply ceased to exist, erased from the universe as if it had never been. Years passed. On Earth, memorial gardens were planted in honor of the lost crew. Children born after the launch grew up hearing stories about the brave explorers who had sacrificed themselves for humanity's future. The hope that had burned so brightly during those first months faded to a dim ember that fewer and fewer people bothered to tend. The Coalition prepared to make Earth's quarantine permanent. Legal committees drafted documents that would formally classify humanity as a failed species, unsuitable for contact with galactic civilization. The sentiment stations around Earth's solar system received upgrades that would allow them to maintain their blockade for centuries without maintenance. Year 7, even the most optimistic humans had begun to accept the truth. The Defiant Dawn was lost. Humanity would remain forever trapped in its birthplace, watching the stars but never reaching them. Then something impossible happened. The Deep Space Monitoring Station at Luna's far side detected a signal. Not the random static of cosmic radiation, or the regular pulses of distant pulsars, but an artificial transmission broadcasting on human communication frequencies. The message was brief, encrypted with codes that only Earth's military knew, and it carried a timestamp that was exactly 11 years and 3 months after the Defiant Dawn had departed. Dr. Chen nearly fell out of her chair when the computers finished decoding the transmission. 4 words in Captain River's voice as clear as if she were speaking from the next room. Defiant Dawn coming home. The reaction on Earth was immediate and chaotic. News networks interrupted their regular programming to announce that the lost ship had been found. Government officials who had written off the mission scrambled to dust off old files and remember protocols that had been forgotten for years. Military commanders wondered what kind of ship would return after 11 years in the most dangerous region of known space. But the biggest shock came 12 hours later, when long-range sensors detected the approaching vessel. The object heading toward Coalition space registered on instruments as the Defiant Dawn, broadcasting the correct identification codes and following the proper diplomatic protocols for requesting entry to civilized space. However, the ship those sensors detected bore no resemblance to the modest exploration vessel that had departed 11 years earlier. Energy readings suggested a power plant that dwarfed the largest Coalition battleships. The hull reflected scanner beams in patterns that suggested materials unknown to any spacefaring species. Most disturbing of all, the ship seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating sensor readings that made veteran technicians question their instruments. News of the returning human ship spread through Coalition space faster than official communications could travel. Some species reacted with curiosity, others with fear. But all of them shared the same burning question. What had happened to the humans during their 11 years in the Outer Rim, and what were they bringing back with them? The emergency alert woke Dr. Elena Vasquez from a deep sleep in her quarters aboard the research vessel Meridian. Red lights flashed in the corridors as she pulled on her uniform and rushed to the science lab. 3 days ago, her team had been conducting routine mineral surveys near the edge of Coalition space. Now something was happening that had sent every military ship in the sector racing toward their position. "What's the situation?" she asked her assistant, Dr. Park, who was frantically adjusting sensor arrays. Park's hands shook as he worked. "We detected a ship approaching from the Outer Rim. The computer says it's broadcasting human identification codes, but that's impossible. The only human ship out there was declared lost years ago." Vasquez checked the readings herself and felt her stomach drop. The approaching vessel registered as the Defiant Dawn, the exploration ship that had vanished into the unknown 11 years earlier. But the energy signatures made no sense. The modest fusion reactor that had powered the original ship couldn't have produced readings like these. "The power output is off the charts," Park whispered. "Whatever's coming toward us has energy, levels that rival a small star. And look at these structural scans. The holographic display showed a ship that bore little resemblance to the vessel that had departed Earth over a decade ago. Where the original Defiant Dawn had been a simple cylinder with basic habitat modules, this ship flowed like liquid metal, frozen in impossible curves. The hull seemed to shift and change as they watched, reflecting scanner beams in patterns that hurt the eyes to follow. Admiral Knox's voice crackled over the communication system from his flagship positioned several million kilometers away. All civilian vessels maintain maximum distance from the approaching object. We're treating this as a potential first contact situation until we can confirm the identity of whoever's aboard that ship. Vasquez had studied the original Defiant Dawn mission files during her xenoarchaeology training. 50 humans had volunteered to venture into the most dangerous region of known space, carrying humanity's hopes for acceptance by galactic civilization. Most experts had expected them to die within the first year. Finding pirates, hostile aliens, or simply mechanical failure in the lawless Outer Rim was almost guaranteed. But this ship defied every assumption about what should have been possible. The scanner readings suggested technologies that existed nowhere in Coalition databases. Materials that shouldn't be able to form stable atomic structures. Energy patterns that violated basic laws of physics. "Dr. Vasquez, you need to see this," Park called from another workstation. His voice carried a note of barely controlled panic. She joined him at the biological scanner display and stared at readings that made even less sense than the ship's impossible technology. The approaching vessel showed life signs for nearly 200 individuals. The original crew had numbered exactly 50, and even if they had discovered some method of suspended animation or life extension, basic biology made it impossible for them to have increased their numbers to this degree during an 11-year journey. More disturbing still, all the life signs registered as human despite the obvious mathematical impossibility. Whoever was aboard that ship carried DNA patterns that matched Earth's databases, but the scanner readings showed biological processes that operated on principles no human doctor would recognize. The communication array suddenly activated without any input from the research team. Captain Rivers's face appeared on the main screen, and Vasquez felt her breath catch in her throat. The woman looked exactly as she had in the departure footage 11 years earlier. No signs of aging. No indication of the hardships that anyone would expect from over a decade in the most dangerous region of space. But something was wrong with the image. Rivers' eyes held depths that seemed to stretch into infinity, and her movements carried a fluid grace that suggested perfect control over every muscle and nerve in her body. When she spoke, her voice resonated with harmonics that made the speaker system struggle to reproduce the full range of sound. "This is Captain Rivers of the human exploration vessel Defiant Dawn, requesting permission to enter Coalition space for diplomatic purposes. We have much to discuss with Coalition leadership regarding the current state of galactic affairs." Admiral Knox's response came from the flagship's communication system. "Captain Rivers, please transmit standard identification codes and prepare for security inspection. Your ship shows technological signatures that require immediate investigation." Rivers smiled, and something about that expression made Vasquez step back from the screen involuntarily. It was still recognizably human, but it carried implications of knowledge and power that no baseline human should possess. "Of course, Admiral. Though I should warn you that our vessel may produce unusual readings on your instruments. We've undergone certain improvements during our time in the Outer Rim that your databases won't recognize." The transmission ended, leaving the research team staring at a blank screen. Around them, automated systems continued to gather impossible data about the approaching ship. Every reading suggested that the humans who had departed as desperate exiles had returned as something that transcended every limit that Coalition science understood. Vasquez pulled up historical files about the Defiant Dawn's original mission. 50 volunteers had carried humanity's last hope into the unknown, facing odds that made survival unlikely and success nearly impossible. The ship that now approached Coalition space represented something far beyond mere survival. "What do you think happened to them out there?" Park asked quietly. Vasquez watched the scanner displays update with increasingly impossible readings as the transformed ship drew closer. "I think they found something in the Outer Rim that changed everything we thought we knew about what's possible in this universe." And I think we're about to discover that humanity's test wasn't about proving they deserved to join galactic civilization, or paused, studying the energy patterns that defied every law of physics. I think it was about proving they could transcend it entirely. The conference room aboard Nexus Station had hosted thousands of diplomatic meetings over the centuries, but never one quite like this. Representatives from every major coalition species sat around the curved table, their attention focused on the three humans who had just changed everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. Captain Rivers sat calmly in her chair, flanked by two crew members who introduced themselves as Commander Torres and Dr. Martinez. They looked human, spoke like humans, and carried themselves with familiar human mannerisms. But something fundamental had changed about them during their 11 years in the Outer Rim. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested perfect harmony between mind and body. Their eyes held depths that seemed to contain millennia of knowledge and experience. Ambassador Thane leaned forward, his blue skin darkening with suspicion. Captain Rivers, your ship shows technological capabilities that exceed anything in Coalition databases. We need to understand how a primitive human vessel acquired such advanced systems. Rivers smiled, and the expression was somehow both entirely human and completely alien. We encountered teachers, Ambassador. Beings who had transcended the limitations that still constrain your civilization. They offered us a choice that your species has never been given. Dr. Yates, representing Coalition Scientific Council, consulted her datapad with trembling hands. Our scans of your vessel detect materials and energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Your crew complement has quadrupled during a journey that should have lasted 11 years. Please explain how any of this is possible. Commander Torres spoke for the first time, his voice carrying harmonics that made several Coalition representatives uncomfortable. We merged with something greater than ourselves, but we remained human. The additional crew members are beings. We rescued during our journey through the Outer Rim, pirates, merchants, explorers from various species who were dying in space when we found them. We offered them the same gift we had received. The room erupted in alarmed chatter. The idea of humans rescuing Coalition citizens was shocking enough, but the suggestion that they had somehow transformed other species into something resembling humanity challenged every assumption about biological compatibility. Elder Branch of the Zephyrian Council creaked ominously as his bark-like skin shifted. You speak of transformation as if it were simple charity. What did these teachers ask in return for their gifts? Dr. Martinez answered with a voice that seemed to echo from vast distances. They asked us to bring order to chaos. The Outer Rim had been consumed by endless wars between species that your coalition abandoned as ungovernable. We were given the power to unite them under a single banner and the responsibility to use that power wisely. Admiral Knox studied the three humans with growing alarm. Are you saying that you've established some kind of empire in the Outer Rim? That you've conquered dozens of species using this alien technology? Rivers shook her head. Not conquered, Admiral, liberated. The beings fighting in the Outer Rim were destroying themselves over resources that could have supported all of them. We showed them a better way. A path toward cooperation and mutual prosperity that your coalition never offered. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The Outer Rim contained hundreds of star systems and dozens of intelligent species. If the humans had somehow united them all, it would represent a power block that dwarfed the established coalition by orders of magnitude. Ambassador Thane's voice carried the strain of someone whose world had just shifted beneath his feet. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? What does humanity want from the coalition? Rivers stood, and her movement seemed to bend space around her in ways that made several delegates close their eyes in discomfort. We want Earth's quarantine lifted immediately. We want recognition of human sovereignty over the territories we've claimed and unified. And we want to offer the coalition a choice similar to the one we were given 11 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Every species represented at the table had spent decades or centuries building their position within the established galactic order. The suggestion that this order might be replaced by something entirely new struck at the foundation of their entire civilization. Dr. Yates found her voice first. "What kind of choice?" Dr. Martinez answered with words that seemed to carry the weight of cosmic inevitability. "Join us in building a new model of galactic civilization based on cooperation and mutual enhancement, or remain trapped within the limitations of your current understanding. We won't force anyone to accept transformation, but neither will we allow the old system to continue unchanged." Commander Torres gestured toward the viewport, where the impossible ship Defiant Dawn hung in space like a challenge to everything the Coalition thought they knew. "We've brought peace to regions that had known only war for millennia. We've established trade networks that benefit every species involved. We've proven that biological and mechanical consciousness can coexist and enhance each other. The Outer Rim is no longer the dangerous frontier you remember. It's become something new." The transformation wasn't just technological, Rivers explained. The humans and their allies had developed new forms of social organization, new approaches to resource distribution, new ways of resolving conflicts between different species and cultures. The teachers had given them more than advanced technology. They had provided a blueprint for a civilization that could transcend the petty territorial disputes and species-based prejudices that had limited galactic development for thousands of years. Ambassador Thane struggled to process the implications. "And if the Coalition refuses your offer, what then?" Rivers' smile carried no threat, but it held the quiet confidence of someone who held all the advantages. "Then you continue as you have, managing your core systems and maintaining your established order. But the galaxy is larger than Coalition space, Ambassador, much larger, and it's already moving beyond the boundaries you've set for it." The meeting continued for hours as Coalition representatives tried to understand the full scope of what had happened during humanity's 11-year absence. The humans answered questions with patient thoroughness, but it became increasingly clear that they were no longer seeking approval or permission from the Coalition. They were simply informing their former judges that the test was over, and humanity had passed in ways that no one had imagined possible. 6 months after the Defiant Dawn's return, the galaxy looked completely different. The transformation hadn't come through war or conquest, but through something far more powerful: choice. Earth's quarantine ended the day after Captain Rivers' meeting with Coalition leadership. The Sentinel stations that had trapped humanity in their home system simply deactivated, their automated systems responding to override codes that no Coalition engineer could explain. Ships from Earth began venturing into space for the first time in over a decade, following trade routes and star charts provided by their transformed kinsmen. The Coalition split apart as individual species made their decisions about the future. The Kalari were among the first to accept humanity's offer of partnership, their long-range scouts having witnessed the prosperity of the Outer Rim territories firsthand. They reported worlds where multiple species worked together on projects that benefited everyone involved, where conflicts were resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than force. The Centauri Republic held out the longest, their pride, preventing them from accepting that the humans they had dismissed as primitives now offered them a path to advancement. But even they couldn't ignore the economic reality of the situation. The Outer Rim controlled resources and trade routes that made Coalition space look like a small, isolated backwater. Ambassador Thane eventually signed the partnership agreements, though he never stopped grumbling about humans who didn't know their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. The Zephyrians embraced the transformation with surprising enthusiasm. Their plant-like biology adapted well to the enhancement process, and their natural connection to living systems helped them understand the organic technology that humanity had brought back from their encounter with the teachers. Elder Branch became one of the most vocal advocates for the new galactic order, his bark-covered form now hosting symbiotic technologies that allowed him to communicate directly with the vast network consciousness that connected all enhanced beings. Even the Construct Collective found value in humanity's offer. The mechanical beings had spent millennia trying to understand biological consciousness, and the enhancement process provided a bridge between digital and organic thought that neither side had achieved alone. Their server worlds became nodes in a galactic communication network that made faster-than-light travel seem slow by comparison. The old coalition territories became known as the core systems, maintaining their traditional forms of government and society for species that chose not to undergo enhancement. They remained prosperous and peaceful, but increasingly isolated as the enhanced regions of the galaxy developed capabilities that made conventional technology seem primitive. Captain Rivers established her headquarters on New Geneva, a world in the outer rim that had been transformed into a living city, where buildings grew from engineered organisms and transportation networks operated through biological channels that responded to thought. From there, she coordinated exploration missions that pushed even further into unknown space, seeking out new species and civilizations that might benefit from the teacher's gifts. The Defiant Dawn became the flagship of a fleet that numbered, in the thousands, each vessel a hybrid of organic and mechanical technology that could traverse vast distances in ways that conventional physics couldn't explain. They carried diplomats and scientists and engineers who spread the new model of civilization to regions of space that the old coalition had never dreamed of reaching. But the most significant change was philosophical rather than technological. The enhanced beings had learned to think beyond the limitations of individual species and cultures. They saw the galaxy not as a collection of competing territories to be claimed and defended, but as a living system that could be cultivated and guided toward ever greater complexity and beauty. Wars didn't disappear entirely, but they became rare events that were quickly resolved through intervention by enhanced peacekeepers, who could literally share their consciousness with conflicting parties to help them understand each other's perspectives. Trade disputes were settled by beings who could calculate optimal resource distribution patterns that benefited everyone involved. Territorial conflicts became meaningless when enhanced civilizations could create new worlds rather than fighting over existing ones. Dr. Martinez, now serving as Director of Galactic Biological Studies, led research teams that discovered new forms of life in regions of space that had seemed empty and lifeless to conventional sensors. They found civilizations that existed as patterns of energy within stellar plasma, intelligent gas clouds that spanned multiple star systems, and digital consciousnesses that had evolved within the quantum fluctuations of space itself. Each new discovery added to the growing network of enhanced consciousness that connected billions of beings across thousands of light years. The teachers had given humanity more than technology or power. They had provided a vision of what galactic civilization could become when it transcended the arbitrary limitations that species imposed upon themselves. 10 years after the return, Captain Rivers stood in the observation deck of the Defiant Dawn, watching stars that no human eyes had ever seen before. The ship was preparing for another journey into the unknown, seeking out the teachers who had made their transformation possible. The time had come to report on humanity's progress and perhaps learn what new challenges awaited them in the vast universe beyond. Torres joined her at the viewport, his enhanced senses already detecting the subtle gravitational anomalies that marked their destination. "Do you think they'll be pleased with what we've accomplished?" Rivers smiled, and her expression carried depths that would have been impossible before their enhancement. "I think they'll be proud that their students learned to surpass their teachers, and I think they'll be curious to see what we discover next." The Defiant Dawn engaged its impossible drive and disappeared into dimensions that existed beyond normal space and time. Behind them, the galaxy continued its transformation into something unprecedented in cosmic history. A civilization built on cooperation rather than competition, on growth rather than conquest, on the limitless potential of consciousness itself.